Hi, and welcome to video lesson number 1 on fractions. Before we get started on our main focus lesson 1, which is finding the sum of unit fractions to represent fractions, we need to go over some vocabulary words. Each student has a sheet with all of these vocabulary words that they should know in order to be successful in our fraction unit. Let's go through them all quickly. Fraction is part of a whole. It's not a whole number, it's a piece of a whole number. Numerator and denominator are the two pieces of a fraction. The denominator is the bottom part of a fraction, the part of the fraction below the fraction line, which tells you how many equal parts there are in the whole or in the entire group. The numerator is the number on top of the fraction line above the line, which tells you how many parts that are being counted. I have Norm, my little stick figure, who's on top. He represents my numerator, and this very big, strong, dominant individual on the bottom because the denominator is the strong one down below. An improper fraction is a fraction whose number is larger than the denominator, so it kind of looks like a big-headed figure that I have drawn over here on the left. Has a very big head and an extremely small bottom, like 4/1. A fraction in simplest forms is when the numerator and denominator have no more common factors other than 1. Similarly, equivalent fractions are fractions that show different numbers with the same exact value. For example, if I had a pizza with 8 different slices, and I wanted to separate it and show that I ate 2 slices of pizza, I could call that 2/8. Here's why. Because if I flip 1/8 over and I add another eighth to it when I add fractions, the denominator stays the same and the numerators get added together. So 1/8 and 1/8 is 2/8. If I wanted to simplify this, put it in simplest form, or find an equivalent fraction that shows 2/8, I could separate this pizza in a different way. I would separate it instead into fourths. I could say I ate 1/4 if I separated it like this. 1/4 of the pizza, 2/4, 3/4, and finally 4/4. And this, which we said we ate earlier, which was 2/8, could also be represented by saying 1/4. Finally, a mixed number. A mixed number is when you have a whole number and a fraction. For example, 1 and 1/4. Let's jump into today's lesson. Our main focus question is how we can represent fractions as the sum of a unit fraction. A unit fraction is nothing more than a fraction with a 1 as your numerator. For example, 1/2, 1/3, 1/4, 1/5, 1/6, 1/7, 1/8, 1/9, and 1/10. So as long as 1 is in the numerator, you are able to represent any fraction as the sum of its unit fractions, because each unit fraction has 1 in the numerator. For example, if I wanted to represent the number 5/8, which I see here, as well as up here on the number line, I could do that by separating it into the sum, an addition problem, of its unit fractions, any fraction with 1 in the numerator. I would just have to do so however many times there were for the fraction itself. In this case, I would have to add 1/8 to itself 5 different times, because each unit fraction then would add the numerator to give you 5, and then the 8 in the denominator would get pushed over into your answer. And that's how fractions can be represented by a sum of their unit fraction. Just like in 3/4, I could take 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4, and I have the sum of my unit fractions, because I'd add the numerators, 1 plus 1 plus 1, which is 3, and I'd push the denominator into my answer, the total portion, which would be 4. And because I'm asking myself if I can represent fractions as the sum of unit fractions, I can see I absolutely can. Because whenever I have a unit fraction, I can add them to other unit fractions to equal my total fraction. That, in short, is lesson 1, your vocabulary and the answer to how you can represent fractions as the sum of unit fractions. Check out the second video and try a few out with your student at home. Thanks for stopping by.